Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. And today, well, the last couple days, they've really given me some ammo and some things to talk about. And in particular, it has to deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. It has to deal with the Bengals, their players, their fans, their coaching staff, everything from top to bottom. They're just a group that's not willing to take accountability. And in that, it was Paul Guenther who started with the quote today, and he says about Vontaze Burfict. You know the Vontaze Burfict, the dirty linebacker that plays for the Bengals, suspended 3 games for the beginning of next season, partly because of his hit on Antonio Brown, a late hit to a defenseless player, gave him a concussion. It was flagged on the field as being a dirty hit, a late hit. But that wasn't the only reason. But Paul Guenther, the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, continues his track record of saying nonsensical things to defend his player. And he says today, and I quote Paul Guenther's words, not mine, "Everybody thinks he's this thug, and he doesn't understand this." Burfict doesn't understand it. Guenther continues. He says, "I think it's awful. The way he's being perceived right now is terrible. I feel terrible for the kid." Now, call it what you will, and some people will use the word thug, and I understand how that could be a bit of an insensitive word when used in certain situations. So if you prefer, we'll use the word dirty player. And we'll say Vontaze Burfict doesn't understand why he's considered a dirty player. I mean, after all, Paul Guenther goes on to say, if he wanted to kill that guy, he could have really killed him. Yeah, that's great, Paul, right? But, he says, but he didn't. I guess he's got to aim lower. I guess I got to teach it different. Whoa. Okay. Paul Guenther, defensive coordinator, and I'm going to get to a very good point here in a second, but I want to go to what Vontaze Burfict was quoted saying the other day. He says, "I play hard. Sometimes it gets me in trouble." And then he says, "My style of play is aggressive. And," referring to the game, "is changed. And I have to change in it. Or change with it." But the game hasn't changed, Vontaze Burfict. You came into the league in 2012, undrafted player. And I think part of that was the league knew his history of being a dirty player. Penalties hurt teams, and the Cincinnati Bengals should know this better than anyone else, having seen their monumental collapse in the final minute against the Steelers. And I'm on record as saying it was the ugliest game I've probably ever seen. It actually turned my stomach, turned me off to the game of football. That's not the way I want to see my team win. That's not the way I would want to win if I played for either of those teams, and it's certainly not a way I'd want to lose either. But there has to be some accountability. You have Adam Pac-Man Jones running around saying that Antonio Brown faked a concussion. It's just wrong. And I can't blame Antonio Brown for not wanting to accept an apology or holding a grudge against somebody that's trying to hurt his career. I mean, let's face it, Antonio Brown, this is what he does for a job. Imagine if somebody went and tried to knock you out walking down the street or walking around in the store and you couldn't go to work and provide for your family. Now, granted, football players make a lot more money, celebrity status, but that's kind of where this brotherhood is. It's like family. Not only within a locker room, but across the league. And you see it. You see players from other teams, they commune with each other. They talk on social media. They're friendly. They go out to eat. They take pictures after the games outside the locker room. Many of them went to college together, or, they, like I said, they might train together in the off season. They may have played for several teams. And if they've played for several teams, you come across a whole plethora of different players over your career, depending on how long you've been in the league. All the different coaching carousels that go on. They bring in their players. They bring them to other teams. They have friends, and they have friends, and people talk. And it's a brotherhood. And within that brotherhood, it's accepted that football is a violent sport. But it doesn't have to be a dirty one. And Paul Guenther and Vontaze Burfict just can't get it through their thick skull why it might be considered dirty play. Guenther also quoted saying when he's done playing football, that is Vontaze Burfict, I'm going to hire him as a coach if I'm still coaching, which is plausible. He says he's way smarter than everybody gives him credit for. Well, he should be. He's college educated. Most of the players, I don't know any player in the NFL that doesn't get there by means of playing college football and attending an academic university. High standards. Many of them have degrees. We're not dealing with dummies here. So for Guenther to tell me that Vontaze Burfict is smart isn't some type of revelation. He should be smart. But he doesn't play like a smart player. He has a history of dirty play, and he refuses to change. Now, keep in mind, the NFL's rules, first with defenseless hits, 2010. That is 2 seasons before Burfict enters the league. And then a season after Burfict enters the league, the helmet hits, or crown of the helmet. And there was already some helmet hits, but the NFL refined it in 2013. And in 2013, Vontaze Burfict got a fine for punching a player in the groin when he was playing the Green Bay Packers. He got another fine in 2014 against Carolina Panthers, twisting the ankles of players after plays have been blown dead, including Cam Newton, after a touchdown. And he accumulates these fines, and he doesn't understand, nor does Paul Guenther, his coach, understand, who should be teaching an educated player something different. They don't understand. They don't understand why Burfict has a 3-game suspension and wants to appeal it. But he wasn't suspended just for merely hitting Antonio Brown in what some people may or may not consider a dirty or late hit fashion. It's for repeat incidents. And he repeats an incident, or has the same type of incident, just a week earlier within the same division. Who would have thought that the Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens would align for a common enemy? Vontaze Burfict is that common enemy. The Baltimore Ravens, let's face it, they've been calling our players dirty for years. James Harrison. And we've been calling their players like Terrell Suggs dirty for years. But here you have two. You ever hear the statement, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? And this is what it is. Because Burfict goes out in the final week of the regular season, a week before the wild card playoff game, where he knocks Antonio Brown's head off, or at least attempts to. And he gets fined $50,000 for hitting Raven tight end Max Williams way away from the play. And because it was off the ball and away from the play, the referees missed it and it wasn't flagged. $50,000, a third fine. How many fines does it take to modify? How many fines does it take to modify someone's behavior? Because let's face it, the reason they fine and suspend players is because they are doing something that the league deems unnecessary. And in this case, this is behavior unbefitting that brotherhood or family of football. Everybody's in this together, but there's no reason to be accusingly spitting on players in the pile, as we heard from Ramon Foster and David DeCastro during the wild card playoff game. We could see with our own eyes as fans. TV cameras don't lie. We see Burfict throwing a knee at Ben Roethlisberger on the ground. And some people are going to debate, well, if that's what really happened, okay, well, nothing came of that. But you can't go out and say that you don't understand why you're being labeled as a dirty player when you are a dirty player and you're doing things that are dirty. You need to clean it up. And it's not the first time against Pittsburgh that Burfict has just been pretty much relegated to jerk status. We remember, I believe it was it week 9 during this 2015 season, that Le'Veon Bell got knocked out of the game by Vontaze Burfict. He went low and took him out for the season. And I think the fraternity of football players wouldn't even question a low hit. We've seen low hits by Steeler players on opponents before. But do we know if it's dirty or not? And when a guy gets up, runs, and celebrates that he injures a player, that leaves reasonable doubt as to his motive. And then when he comes back weeks later and hits another one of your star players and knocks him out of the following game against the Denver Broncos, two of the top Pro Bowl caliber players on the Pittsburgh Steelers knocked out by one man. What do you think? Do you think that's dirty play? Well, Paul Guenther doesn't necessarily think it's dirty play. In fact, when Le'Veon Bell was injured and Burfict runs around and upfield and celebrates, we heard that one of the Steelers' offensive linemen say that Guenther went over to the sideline and apologized for the hit, and Guenther denies it and he chuckles like a smartass, excuse my language. And then afterwards, he's going to tell us that the Le'Veon Bell incident, he goes, that was a clean hit, and you could print that. The guy came out and ran a little option route on him, and Vontaze tackled him, and he just got his feet tangled up underneath him. There was nothing wrong with it. Oh, really, Paul Guenther? The same Paul Guenther that called Joey Porter an embarrassment to the coaching profession has the guts, or maybe he's just ignorant of the fact that his players run around and commit dirty plays. And for that, for enabling a player like Vontaze Burfict to run around like a hooligan, Paul Guenther is just as bad. And I feel he is the real embarrassment to the coaching profession.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.